Empowered people make informed decisions that lead to living a life without regret. This is Sara Khaki and Shawna Woods from Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and this is the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. Welcome to the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. This is Sara Khaki with Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and I'm joined by our very own managing partner, Shawna Woods. Shawna, today we're going to discuss physical abuse, which unfortunately we see a lot in the clients that we represent and support. I know from our firm's perspective, the main area of law we can cover is Georgia law and what Georgia law says about physical abuse. However, we want to have a broader conversation about the topic than just Georgia law, but actually what is experienced during physical abuse, what are some signs of physical abuse, and also times when somebody is involved in physical abuse and not even sure they're a victim of it. And then the other side of it, things that are not actually physical abuse, and how person who may feel like they're in a situation of being a victim to physical abuse, things that they can do to mitigate and protect themselves. All right, so first let's cover some of the legal ground. Shawna, what is physical abuse, as at least as far as Georgia stands?
Well, let's talk about active family violence, because I think that is really where this comes into play with us. And there is a determination of what is an active family violence. And that is being physically touched, intimidated by the other person. And the intimidation has to involve one person touching another one. It can't be, I've touched by you, or I've threatened you. You can't, an active family violence can be a threat if it's a direct threat. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to F you up, right? Those are the kind of things that we hear. Those can be an active family violence, but we can only do something about that as an active family violence if it was either recorded or if it was witnessed by another person. In the state of Georgia, you have to have committed an assault, a battery, or another type of violence against a member of your family or a member of the household that you are residing in, or they have extended it in the state of Georgia to include someone you are dating. But it has to be, if it's going to be that physical violence, it has to be a touch. Now, that touch could be you spat on a person, right? That could be the touch. But most of the time when we're talking about physical violence, we're talking about the hitting, the kicking, the pushing of another human being.
And we thought about this topic, and today is, as we're recording this, it's May 20th, 2024. And what brought this topic to mind is very horrifying video of Sean Puffy Combs, P. Diddy. I don't know what name he goes by these days, but I'm aging myself by letting you know that I think of him as Puff Daddy still. But of the video of him physically abusing his girlfriend through the hotel corridor, hallway, all the way through the elevator. And I watched that, and all I could think to myself is, what would lead a relationship to get to this point? And I thought about so many of our clients who were protecting either through restraining orders or protecting them through the divorce process, and they are in that situation. And what could have been some early signs to know that I am with somebody that has the capacity to be this violent and to be this inhumane. Actually, I was watching the video with my husband, Hisham, and he said, what could have taken so long for this footage to come out? Why are we just now knowing that, like, this is somebody that people are buying his albums or buying his products, and this is a monster? And so it brought up so much sociological, psychological questions of how are these people walking by us, and how many people around us may be victims of this, and what are some signs we could look for? But more importantly, because our mission is about helping people empower themselves, what is a sign somebody can look for themselves early on in a relationship that they may be with somebody that has the mental and physical capacity to actually be that inhumane with you?
I think you bring up a really good question. How could it have gone unnoticed or unchecked for this long? And I've heard some things, who knows if they're true yet or not, but I think that they do sound true, and that the inner circle probably knew for a really long time. That the inner circle probably saw things for a really long time. And I don't think it's just because we're talking about a celebrity who has access to spin doctors and access to lots of money in order to get his side of the story out, or maybe even financially control the other person, because financial control comes in all shapes and sizes.
Right.
And I think that is one of the things that is happens prior to physical abuse, or maybe in conjunction with physical abuse, is taking away the ability to leave, right?
And so I think what you're saying is so important, that financial control comes in all shapes and sizes, meaning whatever your socioeconomic class is, you could still be experiencing financial control, because financial control isn't just about the money, it's the mental control. And what I'm hearing you say, and what makes me think about so many of our clients, is at some point before you gave up your sort of autonomy over your body, where nobody gets to touch you, somewhere along the line you might have given up also your empowerment over yourself, over your own mind, over your own thinking, and it started creeping in and creeping in. So it is, I mean, definitely think there's probably relationships where this happens earlier on, where that monstrous side comes out. But for those relationships that people, somebody been together for years, um and by year 5 or 6, all of a sudden the physical abuse comes along. There must have been some steps before then that led to you physically now handing over your physical body to the perpetrator as well.
One of the things that I think does happen, especially if your spouse is not typically, and this happens in both genders, this is not genderized at all, because I have personally known men who have sat on their hands and gotten beat up by their spouse, because they
Absolutely.
know if at the second they even try to push this person away, they're the ones going to jail, right? And so
This
they have,
was, I mean, this is what we believe happened in the Johnny Depp case.
yes, exactly that type of situation where the male knows, because of perception, and quite frankly, most often it is a male perpetrator, they know they have to sit on their hands. So when we're talking about what leads up to is, and I think Johnny Depp is a great example, because I think that drug and alcohol absolutely fuels this type of manic and abusive mentality. And so if you are with somebody and they have an addiction issue or they have an alcohol issue and they become violent when they're on these, when they're partaking in them, that is still an abuse issue. And just because they blame it on the alcohol or they blame it on the drugs doesn't mean that they don't have an underlying anger management issue all along. It just means that they're able to control it when they're not altered. So I think that's part of it. If you are seeing your spouse become angrier, we've always heard the angry drunk, right?
Mhm.
Or someone who is on amphetamines or cocaine, or even one of the biggest ones, perpetrators that I see, is steroids.
Yeah, the shot of
Um,
testosterone.
that shot of testosterone that really gets, so I think that's one of the precursors if you're talking about, what leads up to violence. Um, Throwing things towards that person, glassware, items that could actually hurt them if it hit them, and throwing it close enough where it's scaring them. It's an
Right.
intentional thing, right? Because the next step is, well, now I didn't get your attention well enough with throwing it at you, so now I have to hit you.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen that for sure when, like, we know we've talked about this before, when physically, biologically, most men are built bigger than women, right? They have a different biology. They have a different set of chemistry that makes their voice deeper and makes them actually bigger than women, more broad shouldered. Of course, we have outliers, but that is the bell curve of the difference in our chemistry. And instinctually, women were designed that when we hear that voice go up and we hear them sort of like hover over us, instinctually we are scared because we're instinctually trained to be scared. And they are learning as they go into malehood and they're getting older that they can actually use that in order to intimidate us. And I think sometimes consciously or subconsciously, I think there's good guys out there that are not, that subconsciously are doing it, are not aware of what they're doing it till their partner tells them, hey, when you're doing that, you're scaring me. I'm just scared. I can't hear what you're saying. Critical thinking goes out the door for me. I'm just looking to protect myself. So I'm not actually engaged in a conversation with you. And then you're raising your voice louder at me and your body's getting more aggressive looking. So I'm just all up in my instincts. I think a good man would hear that and say, oh my God, all I want is for my partner to feel safe and to look at me as a provider and protector. It's the last thing I would want. I think a bad guy would use that as, that's my intimidation tactic. That's how I get what I want. And I do think that because they have this instinctual ability to do that with us, it is up to us to tell them at times that's not cool. And if they don't hear us after that, then I think that's on them. Now, go ahead, Sean. I can sit.
Yeah,
I can
no,
tell that you're on
I
your edge of your seat there.
Well, there was such an excellent comparison about the two, and I don't think that the time to tell your man that you're intimidating me, that you're scaring me, is not in the middle of an argument. Okay, they're not going to be hearing that. The time to tell them that is when everything's cool, has calmed down, and said, "Look, when you approach me, you are a 6'5" man. You so much taller, so much bigger. You intimidate me. Whether you understand that or not, your anger scares me." And a good person, to what you were saying, will take and listen to that. And I've had these conversations with men who have come to me and they're saying, she's saying I'm abusing her, and they would walk me through the scenario. And in their heads, they're just passionately expressing their viewpoint, and they feel that she was passionately expressing her viewpoint. And I said, okay, let's look at the difference in size between the two of you. Do you understand how intimidated she was in this situation? That is not to say that her viewpoint overtakes his in that conversation. I want to be very careful when I'm saying this, because to Sarah's point, once you bring this to the person's attention and say, I'm feeling scared when you do this, it is now incumbent on them to not do it. But if you have not had that conversation of, I'm feeling scared when they do this, do not automatically in your head think they should already know this, because most of the time they don't.
So I'll give a piece of tip that I've used, and I've explained to Hisham, and this made him fully feel this to a whole nother level. I said to him, when you are by yourself in an elevator and elevator door opens and another person walks in, and it's a man or woman, are you ever scared? Is there anything instinctual inside of you that thinks it needs to think of plan B to protect itself? There's no. I go, almost every woman feels that. When we're in an elevator by ourselves and door opens and a man, I don't care what the size of the man is, it actually does not matter. If I'm going to be very in tune with my animal instinct, it does think, in case he wants to attack me, what is my plan? And maybe not every woman's seen as the elevator. Maybe they have another scenario. Maybe it's like getting out of the dark and parking a dark parking lot. But that is our instincts. And for our partner to understand how sometimes their physical being can actually instigate that fear instinct is a huge, huge tactic. But going back to the perpetrators who actually initiate physical abuse, they're the ones that are going to use that against you to win over your body. And to Shawna's point, prior to that, most likely somewhere emotional abuse was in there. And the emotional abuse could have come in many forms, but at some point you stopped critically thinking for yourself with clarity, and he sort of muddied the waters in your thinking. And that made it more tolerable for the physical abuse to happen. And then when the excuses came afterwards, which is, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I'll never drink again. Oh my God, it wasn't me. I'm just so stressed at work, or I'm taking this medicine right now. It's not making me feel like myself. I will never touch you again. I love you, and love bombs you right afterwards. Somewhere along the line, you lost your capacity to think clearly for yourself, and that muddied the water. And I will say, Sean, I think you're right, because I've seen this for sure in our cases where it might have been the financial independence that makes it so scary to leave, even when you're physically being abused. And I'll go out on a limb and say I think that most women do need to make sure that they do have some sort of a financial independence in some shape or form.
Well, not just financial independence. I completely agree with you. And I do think that that's the key to most people staying in an abusive relationship, is they don't feel like financially they can either support themselves or support themselves in the lifestyle that they are enjoying, right? So they feel like it's a trade-off. Okay, well, he doesn't hit me that much, or she only hits me when she's drinking. So we're going to stay in this very dysfunctional relationship together because the finances, right?
Right.
But the lead up to the physical abuse is, not only are they breaking you down by saying, okay, now they're letting me abuse them emotionally. Now they're letting me abuse them financially. Now they're letting me abuse them mentally. Now they've let me cut them off from all their friends and family, right? What they are is desensitizing you to their abuse. And then the ultimate, right? The ultimate power is finally able to physically control you. And we are dealing with people who have this mentality of control. And we're talking about, when we were referencing, I call him P. Diddy, so we're a little bit different there, Sarah, but it's
I guess as pop culture goes, you're younger than me.
Only as pop culture goes. But what we're looking at there is a man who's definitely used to having everybody do exactly what he tells them to do when he tells them to do it. And so he feels like he's been entitled. He's been given that right to physically hurt other people. And what is shocking to me, I suppose it shouldn't be, but what is shocking to me is there are other people in his realm who are just as the same on that level who didn't check him. And I would say to the men listeners out there, we would ask you, please check your men. When you see them engaging in these behaviors and you know it's not right, please check them. Please bring it up to them and say, hey, what's going on here? Because I do think that it comes sometimes better man to man than it comes from woman to man. And so for our allies out there, for the people who are like, yeah, we see this too, I would just say participate. You use the elevator example, Sarah. I had years ago, I was walking out to a pretty empty parking lot by myself. It was late at night after office hours. And I see this man walking towards me, not fast, but fairly fast. And he was saying, hey, hey, hey. And I held out my arm, as far out as I could say, and said, stop. And then I got in my car and left. The next day he came by, and he had actually had an office down the hall from mine. It was a big building. And he said, last night I was offended until I talked to my wife.
Wow.
And he said, I did not understand how scared you must have been with a strange man coming up to you in the middle of the night in an empty parking lot until I talked to my wife. And it's that knowledge base. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that we do these podcasts. We're just sharing the knowledge base. I don't think that we have the solutions, or that we're proposing that we have all the solutions to, these huge problems of life and the world. But sharing the knowledge is that first step. in getting to the point where we help solve the problem?
You bring up such a good story, so I have to share another one too. I had a professor in college, a sociology professor, brilliant. I took most of my sociology classes with him because he would have us do real life, um, like experiences and experiments. But when I was going to college at Georgia State University in downtown Atlanta, when you wanted to leave the main campus and go to one of the other buildings, you would cross by Woodruff Park. And to cross by Woodruff Park, you would have such an incredible diversity of different socioeconomic class. You would have homeless people out there. You would have business people out there. You would have students out there. You would have politicians out there. So you were just like in a mix of different things. And it wouldn't be that uncommon that you would have people walking up to you trying to sell something to you, or you would have homeless people trying to like chase you down, asking for money or something. And one day our professor comes to class. He wanted us to call him Chip. That's your traditional sociology teacher that would just say, call me Chip. So Chip said, guys, I walked to class today and passed by one of my students who I've had 4 classes with. And I went out of my way to make sure to say hi to her. And she just kept her head down and say hi to me. And I thought to myself, she not like me? What's wrong? Like, is she having a bad day? And I thought about it and I thought about it. And finally, I came to the realization of she is a young woman trying to cross through Woodruff Park from one building to another building and be as invisible as she possibly can and make herself feel as safe as she can. And it would not matter who was going to say hi to her. She had a plan of how to get from A to B in the safest way possible, and by attracting as little attention to herself. And she wasn't seeing me as her Professor Chip. She was seeing me as another man that could be potential physical harm to her. And I think those kind of examples are so great to give to our male partners. And I think great male partners, which I do think the majority of them are, they take that and they internalize it. And then they become our allies, and then they become our protectors when they fully understand instinctually what goes on inside of us. But I will say, I do want to bring up one other conversation piece to this, because we see this a lot when we have police reports for potential restraining orders, is the one where there is actually no physical touch person to person, but there has been an object thrown, or there has been a wall punched, or a cabinet slammed, or something around that it was a sign of intimidation. Shawna, let's first start with the law, then we can talk about the psychology of it. Where does the law stand on that in Georgia?
So let's walk through the punching of the walls. That's not going to be a crime. You own your home, or even if you're renting, you can repair the wall. Punching a wall is not illegal, even if it's very close to you. If it can be said that he missed and hit the wall instead of you, that may be an attempt. But most of the time when you're talking about those type of things, they're not going to be crimes. Slamming a cabinet, definitely not. Throwing things is going to depend on whether they were throwing it at you or just throwing it, right? It landed somewhere near you. I have had a judge in one of the outer lying counties grant a protective order because a man threw a remote control. It hit the couch and then hit her knee, not hard enough to bruise it, mind you. And he granted the protective order on that. That was, I feel, kind of an overstep of what the protective order statute was made for. And I think these type of things have to be taken in consideration with the whole. Because if it's a ramp up, right, if things have ramped up, it's been, for example, a man may step up to his spouse and kind of chest bump her, right, a little bit, and he's staring down and intimidating her,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then hits a wall, the court may err on the side of caution there and say, hey, I think this is ramping up. I think this may continue if we don't separate the parties. But if this is, we're going through a really rough time and this was a one-off, then I don't think the court's going to grant the protective order. So I do think it's a accumulation and it has to be taken in totality of everything that's going on. One of the worst things that I think happens is made up stories of abuse, because not only do they affect the person who is being lied about, and perhaps the children, but they are also affecting all those stories of women who really have been abused or men who really have been abused. They dilute the actual abuse and it's not as strong anymore.
Yeah, I mean, again, who knows whatever was the truth in the Depp versus or Heard versus Depp case, but her story, that narrative after the final case came through, it did definitely hurt so many other women who were really victims of abuse. And I think that as a mother of two boys and as a wife and as a younger sister to an older brother who did have a much bigger physical physique than me, I will say that there is a point where men do get triggered. Our animal instinct of getting so scared physically, and their animal instinct of this woman is not safe. This woman is crazy, and if she was a man, I should punch her, right? That part we do need to be thoughtful of, because I do think it happens when not in this present in her presence, not near her, where a man may walk off and be so mad that he just goes and punches a door, or he kicks something, or he throws something. And to me, I think that there are times when good men do that just to release the amount of frustration and anger that the situation put them in. And I do think there's a difference between doing it that way, where you're releasing it so that you're wanting to honor your moral compass of, I never want to touch a woman, but I am fueled and I need to punch something. And I'm going to go punch a wall instead, or I'm going to go punch a pillow instead, versus that being done in the presence of the woman in order to intimidate her, of kind of saying your face is next sort of thing. And I do think that those who abuse the physical abuse framework, or abuse the idea of I'm a victim, and they use that to have abusive litigation or harm men that would never hurt them. They will even look at that point when a man goes off and releases his anger on an foreign object somewhere else as, then he went and broke the cabinets. Well, let's learn some more factors about how that was done. Maybe that was his way of releasing something inside of him so that he could keep his moral compass of, I will never touch a woman.
I agree with you. And I do think that there are times when it's mutual combatant, which I, again, never justify a person who's bigger and stronger hitting, pushing, being intimidating to somebody who is weaker and smaller. That's just not something that any of us do, right? We think, just for women, think about children, right? You're not going to physically intimidate them if you're a good person, right? That's not what you're doing. Now, there are women out there who will do it, but there are also people who have these volatile relationships that both of them have been engaging in abusive behavior. And then to turn it and say, oh, no, it was only this person, right, who was abusive. And I do think that we have to look at all of these factors. And that's not to say I'm ever blaming the victim. I am not. I definitely want people to take responsibility for their own actions and everything in each of their arguments, in each of their relationships. The abuse, when you're looking at it, I don't think it comes from, when someone is walking away and then hits something, right? that's not coming towards you.
Mhm.
It's a difference. And there are people out there who may not know the difference in their mindset that they are at that point in time. So it's really good to talk with your attorney, one, talk with your friends, talk with the people that you trust about the entire situation and get a real feel for it. And if you are in an abusive situation, you need to put together that plan of action to get yourself out
Absolutely. And
and get your
don't let the shame and guilt of that this happened stop you in doing that, because I think that's also another reason why so many people who are facing physical abuse, they feel so shameful about it, that something's wrong with me, or I am so weak, I can't believe I let this happen, and they judge themselves for it, that they have a hard time ever speaking up and seeking help.
or on the flip side, if they have the person who plays the victim, right?
Right.
Who I've got a situation right now who I'm trying to help a person who won't let me share too much information with the opposing counsel because every time I do, the spouse goes, "You're so mean for telling the attorneys on me. How
Hmm.
dare you tell everybody about what I did?" Instead of going, "Well, how dare I do that?" Right? How dare
Right.
I act in that manner? They still pull on, we're gonna keep this little secret inside our little hubby hole, and it's most of the time when they throw out these, like, "We're soulmates. We are together for life. Therefore, you have betrayed me
Yeah.
by telling people I abused you."
Or you pushed me to do this.
Yes, it's your fault,
Yeah, it's
right?
your fault.
We're in this together, and it's your fault that I did this.
So it becomes like a joint dirty secret almost, that
It
you're
does.
pushing me to beat you, I'm beating you, and then your job is to keep it a secret. Our job together is to hide this together. So they almost go into partnership on the abuse cycle.
Yes, because it goes into, if you weren't such an awful person, I wouldn't have to beat you.
Right.
And nobody wants to tell everybody they're an awful person.
Wow.
That's the mindset they've got to break. You've got to break away from that mindset that you somehow deserve physical abuse.
Thank you, Shawna.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Happily Ever After Divorce podcast. If you'd like to learn more, go to atlantadivorcelawgroup.com/resources.